Hey everybody, welcome to the Voxology Podcast. Mike here with Tim Stafford and a very, very special guest today. My son, who?
Seth, hello!
Hello! Hey. Seth Thomas is a bit of a rough patch. We had some vomiting last week and some vomiting this week with some fever. My sweet wife is taking him to get a COVID test here in a couple minutes. Yep, we'll probably test for the flu. But Seth, man, when Seth Erie isn't eating his favorite foods, you know it's serious.
You know it's bad.
Right?
Yeah.
No mama's chicken from Chick-fil-A?
No chicken. And then we got fries yesterday, and not one fry was eaten, which is, I can't even tell you. That's the equivalent of setting ice cream down in front of Seth's father, who shall remain nameless, and expecting that to go in touch. Now, today, Seth, do you have anything you want to tell us? I mean, how's your life going, buddy?
My life is good.
My life is good. Nice. And do you know how much it makes me happy to be your dad?
So.
Journey Church?
Yeah.
Well, they love you too. Absolutely. So anyway, Seth is hanging around in the most wonderful ways, but I always hate to just, the eyes, Tim, you know this because you have children, but their eyes give it away when they're really sick. You can just see it in their eyes.
Totally.
So Steffi's making big eyes at me right now, but yes, you can just sort of see it.
There it is.
What's that?
There it is right there.
Yeah, the eyes that we're seeing right now are exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, Timothy, we are going to do a kind of a special episode today. We've threatened for a couple of episodes, but today we wanted to just give center stage to all of the voices that are contributing to the conversation. And this is nothing more than us reading and responding to comments, critiques, and questions, and it is just wonderful. We learn so much, and our thinking is clarified when we hear from you. And then some of the points you raise and questions you raise and stories you tell are absolutely inspiring and thought-provoking. So if you're a fan of that, then you are going to get your money's worth today,
Boy,
my
are you
friends.
in for a treat.
Yep, we're still going to record another episode on the unity. I think that'll be the last official conversation about the unity piece. But anyway, today we're just going to read a bunch of emails from folks. And this is, we have hundreds sitting in our inbox, and they're all, super thoughtful. So anyway, Timothy, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Tim, hit the music. Sharon, please.
So, Tim, that puts you in a great mood, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. How are you?
Drum roll, please.
Oh, I love that. It's Seth. All right. I am going to read an email from somebody. Hello, Mike and Tim.
Hello.
I am a closeted side B Christian pursuing celibacy. And side B means you were attracted to the same sex, but hold the traditional Christian teaching that sex is reserved for heterosexual marriage. I have been so encouraged by the conversations you all have been having on the podcast, and especially been enjoying the series Unbounded, Fuzzy, Center-Oriented Churches. I have a small nuance concerning your most recent episode, number 333, and he adds halfway to a rather unfortunate number.
That'll be a special episode.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's funny. You all talked about wanting to avoid making doctrinal statements where possible, so as not to avoid unnecessary boundaries, and I think I primarily agree. Documents such as the Nashville Statement have caused unnecessary harm for a lot of Side B Christians and have limited opportunities for organizations that adopt it to engage in the experiences of sexual minorities. The Nashville Statement was written by, I think, the Council of Biblical Manhood, Womanhood, and it would be everything that you would expect from them.
How do you get on that council? Is that like a self-appointed position?
Well, evidently you have to be a biblical man or biblical woman. So,
There you go.
I think that rules us out. At the same time, excuse me, I need to cough. Wow. Many Side B and Side A folks. So this is language that's used within the community to talk about the posture of Christians who are same-sex attracted to historical teaching. Side B folks often will hold to the historical teaching. Side A folks will say that historical teaching isn't really addressing, sexuality as we know it 2,000 years later. And they work hard. From my experience, there's a lot of great conversation between the two communities within that subset. So at the same time, many Side B and Side A folks will also point to a common bait and switch in church experiences. This is such a good nuance. We might put down roots in a congregation only to be told 2 years in that we don't permit a gay person to teach or work with kids or whatever other thing it may be. This happens to both Side A and Side B believers. See Church Clarity for the work they are doing to minimize this experience. We talked about Church Clarity years ago, and it rates churches on their, I don't know how best to say this, on their welcoming. So a lot of churches will say, oh, of course we welcome everybody, but then you get into them and you realize, well, you're not welcomed into leadership, you're not welcomed into certain aspects of service, and so there's this kind of
tithe.
Unwritten, always welcome to tithe, baby. And there's this certain sort of unwritten rule or barrier that churches don't announce. And so what our commenter is saying, which is really, really important, our point was the worst thing to do is to just have statements on things, because that literally just communicates boundaries. The counter to that, which our commenter is making, is but sometimes it'd be nice to know those boundaries before you put down roots in a church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I have total respect for that. How can we continue, he writes, focusing towards the center rather than excluding, while at the same time avoiding these scenarios of leading someone on? Man, that is so good. So, Tim, why don't you take this one? Man, this, Timothy, is a great question. And I don't know that I have a great answer. I do have some thoughts around the kind of dynamics. I think statements, no matter their intent, create dynamics that we have to be super careful with. So I'm still suspicious of churches that will have statements about things and not other things. So the statement making dynamic is one I want to resist. I do want to embrace the honesty to say when people ask, hey, we're really wrestling through this issue. There are many ways that Christians approach it, and we're not unified. We make room. One of the things we said about our Vox community when we planted a church in California was we wanted to be a place where affirming and not affirming Christians could love and serve each other. And so we had people in our community who were Side A, people in our community who were Side B, and people in our community who, thought that being gay is a sin and enough to damn you to hell. And all of those people would take the Lord's Supper together, and it was messy. We didn't always handle it perfectly, but that's the center set approach. We would rather take the mess of individual discernment, and it goes back to the question that originally raised this whole dynamic and
the whole
kind
unity
of
thing.
Yeah, the whole unity thing. Am I supposed to be unified with people who, and then fill in the political opinions, who embrace white supremacy or Christian nationalism or whatever? And on the other side, Christians that have succumbed to the woke ideologies or all sorts of pejorative names. And the answer, of course, is, well, it depends what unity means. If unity just means, hey, we're going to build uniformity around certain boundary lines, then no, we don't want to be unified in that way whatsoever. But if unity means I'm unified with the people who are pursuing Jesus, recognizing that there are people in different rates of approach and different distances needed to travel, then I can be unified in a community with people whose views I cannot stand, nor whose sins I cannot tolerate. So the center dynamic is the withholding of judgment from each other, the non-ordering of discipleship from each other as we pursue Jesus together, and then waiting until we get into the with, towards, for, committed to relational postures. If there is any towarding to be done, it's then and only then. And it's done recognizing myself as the greater sinner versus, because I have the log in my own eye versus the speck in somebody else's. So I think churches should be honest, absolutely, but their honesty should not be captured in a statement. I think statements set up dynamics that are not centered set. But if there is a resistance, if there is some sort of posture that says, yes, you're welcome, but only so far, absolutely that should be communicated with the greatest clarity. But even then, it should be done in relational dynamics that care for and desire to include rather than to exclude. So there should be honesty, even if the honesty is just, it's a mess. We're not sure right now.
Which is the only true honest answer is we're all a mess.
Yes.
I don't get the need for statements in these policies or whatever. And maybe this is part of the reason I'm struggling with church in general. I'm just like, I'll walk this long road with anybody, period.
Yep. That's what discipleship is. That's right. So I think statements and policies often inhibit that, but our commenter raises a great point. And so I think churches should be very honest when approached about what their views are. If I were approached about our little community, I would say, hey, we want to be a people where affirming and non-affirming people can love and serve each other, recognizing that I've come across folks who seem to be unbelievably committed to Jesus, who are side A, who are side B, and who are not side anything. And who think the whole conversation, so the posture is openness to Jesus. The posture is not. Now, one of the ways, of course, you measure openness to Jesus is by the desire to learn and apprentice yourself to him and become a student and so on. But that happens in so many different ways, in so many different orders, and in so many different, processes that it's tough for anyone to make a determination about who would serve in leadership and who would not. Right? You would have to know so deeply the person. And of course, I would consider people who are same-sex attracted for leadership positions. In the same way, I would consider opposite-sex attracted folks for leadership positions, right? Because the issue isn't what it is that I'm coming into the Jesus conversation with. It's what I'm doing in the midst of the Jesus conversation as I'm invited to follow him. That's where you see the real fruit of someone's life. It's not on an issue that can be mapped out on a statement and given an easy yes or no answer. So to me, the center set deals with the heart. To me, the center set clarifies the center. Jesus did teach about sexuality. I think we have to wrestle with that. I don't have to go to Leviticus or Romans or 1 Corinthians. When Jesus talks about divorce, there is it seems to be a Genesis 2 sort of like authoritative teaching. And yet I fall short of that too. So we have to make room in clarifying the center for, yes, Jesus does talk about sexuality, but how does he do it? And who does he do it to? And what's the result of his talking about sexuality? That's what we have to study. And that's where I just am in agreement with Gambas, that until we are willing and ready, if we hold the traditional Christian view, until we are willing and ready to walk with our friends and neighbors and family members from the LGBTQ plus community in loving, long-term, mutually supportive and reciprocal relationships, then we ought to just keep our mouths shut. So that's all I have to say about that. And I'm sure...
Zip it.
And we've talked so much about this. So I refer you to an episode we did several episodes ago where we were talking about what are new creation dynamics when it comes to this conversation. So I would refer you to a fuller explanation. But I so agree. We have to be honest about where we're at on some of these issues, to honor the people who are coming, especially if they're being asked to give and serve and attend and belong. I think that is absolutely true. I just don't think statements can capture it. So great question. Here's a critique.
Well,
I came away from listening to episode 314 feeling grieved. So I think we were talking about one of our Bible series, talking about the book of Revelation. I came away wondering if I should feel grateful to you, Mike, that you are saving us from the stupid, idiotic theologians and scholars who have gone before you and me. Those who passed the faith on to us, who lived in much less lavish times. Those who looked at the book of Revelation both as apocalyptic literature and prophetic. That I also should be glad that Mike knows exactly how the first century church received the letter from John. Yes, you should be grateful. I grieve, and he goes on, though, that was not him, that was me. I grieve over the church as a pastor as I see the church shrinking. In many cases, because individuals feel that they know best on how the church should be. What has happened to humbleness and community as we both agree we should be participating in it? What has happened to people who come to be part of a body, not to see Jesus, but to examine it if it is being done correctly and right? Rarely do people call and ask me about my heart for Jesus. I simply get asked if I fit into their mold. I know you were only criticizing your own, but I really came away grieved in spirit with the rhetoric. Sincerely, from a Voxology community member. So here's what I hear, and I did respond and apologizing, because if ever it comes across, there are I see two really old creation sort of attitudes that I am fully capable of displaying. One is, can you believe those idiots believed that? So yes, I receive that correction, and I never want to give off that vibe. Absolutely. Totally. The vibe I do want to give off is, man, bad theology really hurts, and this is bad theology. The other vibe I don't want to give off is being critical of the church just for the sake of being critical. And that's why it's so important, dear questioner, that you know that I'm serving in a church as a teaching pastor, that I am committed to a local body, that I absolutely work to renew, restore, all the things that we talk about in theory. I am part of a group of people that are trying to work out in practice. So I am not in any way, and I totally agree, I can come off this way, and I apologize for that. That is not at all the way I want to come across. I, as part of my discipleship, want to excavate the assumptions surrounding my Christian upbringing, because what I've come to realize is much of that reflects American culture or Western Christianity rather than the biblical, concepts. And if you're saying that we're not allowed to critique other views and say that those are not less, or to not say they're less biblical, I guess I would push back on that and say, well, I think that's part of what we have to do. I see Jesus doing that. I see Paul doing that. I see really the Bible as a whole narrative of people doing that in light of the fresh move of Yahweh and his son Jesus. And so I do think there's a place to critique other views without condemning other people. And if ever I cross that line, or when I cross that line, I am very, very sorry. That is not something I ever want to do. Gambas has a great line where he talks about he wants to be a critical thinker but not have a critical spirit. Yeah. And so for me, being involved in a local community, in all of its warts and all, and knowing I bring warts to it, has been absolutely redemptive. So the critique comes from a place, for at least in my mind, and if and when I express it differently, that's totally on me. The critique comes from a place of love and passion. It's like sitting down for marriage counseling and having hard conversations, not because you're trying to destroy the other person, but because you're trying to save the marriage. The marriage is so important to you, you're willing to put yourself through very difficult conversations in order to come out the other side a better couple. In that same way, there are so many things that are being revealed in the church, and I do think we have permission to critique them and call them out. He
like
very
C.S. Lewis
graciously
that talked about it as like a scalpel, or like the scalpel hurts when it cuts, but the point of it is to remove something that is cancerous or is harming or is whatever, but the cut does hurt.
Yep.
The placebo pill doesn't, but it does nothing.
Absolutely. But I can receive this and say, yeah. I can see where people would look at our endeavor and say, well, all you're doing is taking shots, and it's so negative and whatever else.
There's no way around that.
Yeah.
I mean, because even when we take a more passive or gentle, the critique comes from the other side too. I think the line that you said was to critique or to discuss bad theology or ideology and not attack the people. And we've been talking about this too with like combating ideologies rather than just combating these loud voices. And
yes.
How often with a lot of the loud voices, it's a fight you can't win. It's not one that's worth picking.
Yeah.
But combating ideologies and giving people, hopefully encouraging people to gain the skills of critical thinking so that they can also engage in that conversation and find truth based on data and whatever. I think that's a very noble fight.
Yeah.
And I have no interest in getting in a boxing ring with, well, I do, but I know that I shouldn't.
So I receive, and I think we both receive that as, and we've heard this critique before, it is the constant battle.
That's why we're fighting for Timbits instead of Tim's troubled times.
Yes. And I just have to say again, personally, that is why for me, belonging and participating in a community is so unbelievably important, because I see the beauty of it. I see the beauty of it too. Yeah. And so anyway, correction received. I think you're right on. And I definitely don't want to be a kind of person, because all I'm doing is channeling smarter people. I mean, it's not like Mike Erie is much of anything. It's that there are these thick veins of scholarship in the mountain of Christian tradition that I wasn't introduced to, neither in church experience nor in seminary. And I find a lot of that thinking very compelling and refreshing. And it addresses the kind of concerns my children have about this thing that we call following Christ. So, anywho, great stuff. We always welcome critique. Timothy, why don't you read one, my friend?
All right, I'll read one. Hey, Mike and Tim.
Hey.
First time writing in, but long time listener.
I love that. That is the best intro.
Your podcast alongside the Holy Post has really been a blessing to me over the last several years. I wanted to share a little bit of my ongoing journey in deconstruction. A large hill in my deconstruction journey was my inner battle with a more fundamentalist upbringing regarding science. I have a grandfather who strongly believes in a literal young earth 7-day creation and holds this as a core tenet of Christianity for some reason.
Yep.
I am in the healthcare profession and had to take a lot of biology, chemistry, and physics throughout undergrad and grad school. My grandfather had always told me that I needed to be very careful with my public school education because my teachers, especially my science teachers, were going to indoctrinate me and lead me away from my faith.
Yeah.
A lot of these teachers were actually very kind and thoughtful people. Who would have thunk? Winky emoji. This was obviously in direct contrast to what my grandfather would have me believe. This could have been a breaking point for me and a place to turn away from my faith like I was warned it would before. However, throughout this time I was involved in a campus ministry on my college campus and was being discipled by a great guy who helped me wrestle through these questions. He was the first person to tell me that there are theologians and scientists that have done a lot more research than either of us or my grandfather have ever done, and come down on a variety of different views. He was the first one to demonstrate humility in his beliefs, but still hold the conviction of Christ's love firmly. Since then, organizations like BioLogos have helped me to continue to hold both science and faith together with humility and conviction. I really feel like my discipler in college through Cru saved me a lot of potential pain and frustration. I am still on this journey of deconstruction and reconciliation. I hope I always will be. Amen. But I find that I grow more in love with Christ, especially as I see the faults in myself and other believers around me.
That's awesome.
Yep. Yes. I've never understood the disparity between faith and science. Science to me is like a way of understanding. It's like our way of understanding and being able to explore God's creation.
Right.
And they seem so hand in hand. And the stewardship that comes from that understanding, not the ignorance of it, seems like it's worship as well. These seem like very tangible forms of worship to me.
When the inerrancy battles were raging, this became kind of a shibboleth, a literal, do you take Genesis 1 literally or figuratively for whether or not you held to inerrancy? Thankfully, we're moving beyond that. It's one of those things, and I've done it too. I mean, of course, we elevate really, really peripheral issues into the center. And that's why the center can't be a set of believings. The center has to be a person and a relational dynamic among people who are pursuing this person, and this person is pursuing us. And so I grieve that. I'm thrilled to find people who are secure in their own faith enough to say, hey, there are many different views on this and a lot of different really intelligent people.
Yes.
That's such a big deal. It's the boundary mode of no, this is what you've got to believe if you take the Bible seriously. That is far easier. It's much harder to become a person who just says, yeah, there are a lot of different views on this. And man, some of the most incredible scientists have been followers of Jesus, and there are certain assumptions that we can quibble with that undergird science that sometimes get expressed by the new atheists as being hostile to faith. But the endeavor itself, the way that you know things through curiosity and humility and continual testing and repetition and self-critique and peer critique, all of that, why wouldn't we want that?
Yeah.
So I'm with you. To me, I follow on Twitter astrologists, and is that right? Astrologists?
Are you into astrology?
No.
Like reading signs and...
No. So astrophysicists. Man, I always mess that up. I do not follow astrologists. I follow astrophysicists who are always showing pictures, from the Hubble telescope. And my goodness, of course, you can look upon that and just go, man, that is amazing. And what an amazing feat that we are here to enjoy it.
Yeah.
To me, I'm with you, man. I go straight to worship in those sorts of places. So great.
The interesting catalyst in this email is, for me, is not the science versus faith. I normally wouldn't even engage that conversation, but the one about how you continue to be in conversation with family members who are like cemented into a view.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's such a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah.
Like, it's I don't think there's like a right or easy way to do it. You just like, you have to figure out how to take it one step at a time and be humble and be patient and be part of a long conversation rather than a bunch of short, terse arguments.
Yes.
That's a hard one.
It really, really is. And it requires the center set relational dynamics that are really foreign to us. To have been discipled in polarization and demonization and name calling and all those sorts of things, and then to sit in relational community with people that, totally trigger all of those old creation dynamics, and to put on instead humility, curiosity, question asking, the valuing of the person regardless of the view. I mean, all of that requires a lot of maturity. And so one of the things that I want to commend the discipler on is, and this is how I want to be. I mean, at worst, I can come across as, an arrogant know-it-all. At best, I want to come across as somebody who is curious and makes room at a very large table for all sorts of people to sit and have conversations. So
yeah, curiosity and humility.
Come on.
The humility of being able to say, hey, yeah, guess what? This is a shocker, but there are and have been many people who are much more researched and read than I.
What?
And you. Seems like it's
all right. Excellent, Timothy. Hey. Exclamation point. I'm the kind of person that uses exclamation points a lot.
You text in all caps.
All caps. Well, especially if I'm being sarcastic or excited. So, and that turns out to be my two primary texting emotions. So a lot of all caps. But I love exclamation points. In fact, I have to discipline myself. I will go back and reread an email to make sure that I haven't used exclamation points at the end of every sentence. And if I do, I will replace them with periods just so people don't think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
So anyone that leads off by saying, hey, exclamation point, I'm in already.
They're speaking your love language.
Already. The discussion concerning bounded, fuzzy, and centered sets has been really great. I was introduced to this previously by a spiritual mentor, and I realized it was the key piece in not my deconstruction, but what I think of as my current spiritual reevaluation. This process began with problems in my congregation around women in leadership and pastoral authority. And when I was introduced to this topic of bounded and centered sets, I realized that one of my big beefs and hurts that I carried out of the experience was that I thought I was in a centered community, but the structure in place was very bounded. There were lines, and I was not on the right side of them. But the really big point I wanted to mention here regarding bounded and centered is the relational aspect of the points you're making. I really appreciated how you brought in the topic of marriage, because approaching marriage and parenting with the idea of being oriented towards the other or being the best spouse or parent you can collectively be, instead of focusing on the lines of this is right or this is wrong, has been such a beautiful pivot in my life. Instead of being mad that my husband did something I thought was stupid, which, my wife has never experienced that emotion, just FYI. So that we can't really relate at this. Instead of being mad that my husband did something I thought was stupid with our kids or with me, I remind myself that I trust him. That's a relational dynamic. And that he typically is authentically making choices that he thinks are the best for our kids or me. Those choices look very different for me as I make choices that I think will be best both for our kids or him. But ultimately, we're both centered on making the best possible choices for our kids, our marriage, or whatever. It has at least given us a more productive place to start our fights from. Amen. But she is capturing something absolutely beautiful here, right? Disagreement between two people who are centered is different than disagreement over boundary lines.
Yes, totally.
And boundaries, like getting rid of bounded thinking doesn't mean we won't have conflict. Of course, we're going to have conflict on the way to the center.
And that was part of last week's.
Yes. But she's capturing that same dynamic. We are committed to each other. We are with each other. We are for each other. And there are times we toward each other, right, whether the towarding is invited or not. It's at least tolerated, though, because of the relational dynamics already in place. That's what she's saying. That's a great example. This idea has really helped me as well as I relate to other people who follow Christ. An example is this. I work with a woman older than myself that is authentically centered towards Christ. She also believes that COVID isn't real, and if you wear a mask, you are against personal liberties. Would I choose to bare my soul to her? No. However, I don't hold back loving Jesus either. We always have an understanding that we both love and follow Christ, but that we don't always agree on what that might look like, and that's what grace is for. I don't trust her with everything, but I do trust her to put Christ first. I see us both as part of his church, even though we probably would never be part of the same congregation. That's what church unity means to me. Well, I have to say it, dear commenter, this is exactly the journey we want to all be on.
Yeah.
And unity does not mean that I am fully committed to the things that the people I'm identifying with hold. Absolutely. It does mean, though, that I can treasure and value them as part of a community. And as you say, not trust them with everything that I think and everything that I think they should think. So I love that. Tim, you've got a thoughtful face.
I'm just thinking through scenarios of like, she mentioned the COVID denying and that kind of stuff. And there are ramifications to certain belief sets that people that are in your immediate community may hold. That's just always a struggle. It's often, not always, but often the loudest voices can be some of the most destructive ones.
Yes.
And when you're being quiet while the others are being loud, it can be a really hard posture to hold.
Absolutely. And I don't think new creation centered set dynamics mean we're quiet.
Yeah, but it becomes a difficult, it just becomes a difficult negotiation within yourself. I'm trying to use diplomatic terms.
Well, don't.
But you know what I mean? Like there are moments where you have to, but then that starts to become a slippery slope of fighting, of then engaging in so many battles that
totally
you're back to where you started. You're back to here's the line. I'm on this side. You're on this side, and
right.
But you're wrong on your side. So I must persevere.
Yeah. And the COVID thing, I mean, the view that COVID isn't real has done real damage in our world and cost
over
human
1 million
lives.
people dead in our country.
Yeah. So I do think, whether it's masks, whether it's vaccinations, those are real conversation that have real consequences. But I don't think any of that gets us off of the command to love our neighbor and our enemy. And so love, again, doesn't mean affection for or agreement with. Love means benevolent action towards.
Right.
So we may just agree, we're not going to talk about our views on this because we each think the other is crazy. Okay. I think that's a new creation posture that's just recognizing, my goodness, everything's so polarized. But the maturity that it takes to sit in that dynamic and not just label the other and demonize the other is the new creation dynamic itself that Jesus wants us to
just gets
practice.
Hard. Like this morning when I dropped my kids off at school, there was that whole group of moms out there again with their posters protesting masks. But there's no one out there protesting kids should have masks on.
Right.
I'm only saying that in regards to we've had so many emails about churches splitting over this mask issue.
Yeah.
And it's hard because if it tends to be more protest against, not people protesting for.
Right.
And so it becomes hard to sit in a pew together when the loudest voice is not posturing towards the center, is posturing towards this one specific thing, but enough that it causes the church to split and the pastor to quit. And that, you know what I mean? It's just then it's hard to say, well, then are we just all leaving? Because we cannot posture towards the center together. And then do we just become two different religions? I don't know. It's just this, the more I follow it through, I'm just like, oh.
Well, it depends if they're elevating. See, you can be centered all you want, but if you make your views on masks, politics, or vaccines a boundary, then it doesn't matter. You're not centered at all anymore.
Right.
And so I'm seeing boundaries, and we talked about this in the first episode. It used to be the boundaries were theological. Now the boundaries tend to be your views on sexuality. And now they're political, and very specifically political about mass vaccines, whatever. So is it possible to have a disagreement about vaccines in a centered way? Yes, absolutely.
I would assume so.
And it's also much more likely and much easier to do it in a bounded way. And so, yes, I think...
That's what so many things break down to. It's just easier.
Well, of course.
It requires less work, less thinking.
Yep. That's why we all do it. All of it. I mean, we are all guilty of this. And that's why you cannot measure, is someone oriented towards Jesus by their verbal agreement to a set of believing statements. You know, are the people that are centered toward Jesus, are we willing to be corrected? Are we willing to grow? Are we willing to be wrong? Are we willing to love those who think we're wrong? I mean, literally, the idea that being in community with someone who is, you know, in our example, anti-mask, anti-vax, and we think their views are doing real harm, you know, the easiest thing and the almost self-righteous, you know, tribal thing is to just have nothing to do with those people. And yet there are millions and millions and millions of them. We all know or are related to some of them. And so the idea of our being right on this has to be secondary to something else. And what is that something else? Now, agreed, we're not, I mean, of course, we have a mutual friend who says often, I don't know who I can trust to tell my real opinions to anymore, right? And there have to be a group of people that you find completely safe to process things out loud with. But that's as it should be, right? You shouldn't be doing this with hordes of people anyway. The idea, though, that there is a group of people committed to mutual learning, committed to the relational dynamics that undergird true, authentic relationship, man, that's incredible. And I don't think you find many of those kinds of people as you go along. The rest, you know, we put up with and tolerate each other for the sake of mutual peace.
Yeah. It gets hard when it becomes a harmful topic. And so I guess a lot of people don't think that COVID killing a lot of people is a harmful topic. But when the belief system is one that is causing harm, like the 7-day creation thing, it's like, whatever. You think it was 7 days, you think it was 60 trillion years, whatever. We can agree to disagree and break bread. But when it comes to those belief systems and one of them causing actual harm, that gets a little tricky. Even like the affirming, non-affirming, like having affirming and non-affirming be able to sit together. The problem with that dynamic is it's only about the person. It's only about the person whose sexuality is not the standard. It's not about the person whose sexuality is the standard. The affirming and non-affirming is all about one person. It's not about the other person. So they become the focus of that conversation rather than part of the conversation. Does that make sense?
Oh, in its worst ways, absolutely, that's what happens. In its best ways, the presence of David Fitch, a guy we've had on the podcast, talks about a posture that churches should have called mutually welcoming and mutually transforming. That I need sexual minorities to help spur me on in discipleship. And that any conversation we're having about that is an absolute two-way street. You know what I mean? So that if done well, it should be an absolute back and forth. It's not just about this other person's sin and whether or not, you know, it's okay. It's for me as somebody who wants to be centered. I always start with I'm the biggest sinner in this dynamic right now, and I have all sorts of sexual sin, and so. If we're excluding people on the basis of, quote, sexual sin, then I'm the first to be excluded. If I see myself as included in the people of God, then what are the dynamics that I've allowed myself to experience that make that judgment real for me? And then I simply offer those to people who, who have different views and positions on things in the same way I always offered them as I was working out my own issues.
Right.
I don't know if this is making any sense. There's such thick and troublesome stuff. But see, this is why our community is great. This forces us into clarifications and questions. I thought this was a great question. let's see here. Hey guys, super appreciate your podcast. But here's where my mind goes fuzzy, and I want to hear your thoughts. Weren't non-denominational churches supposed to be the center focus sets trying to break down the boundaries of the bounded set? And I don't know how or who or why, but it feels like the marketing arm of evangelicalism sucked all denominational and non-denominational churches that have a low church hierarchy structure up and gave them Max Lucado books, and bada boom, bada bing, it gave us Donald Trump. How do you suggest we stay vigilant? I feel like Tim brings up the great point of a bounded mindset folks always showing up at centered set groups and slowly chipping away with their Fox News discipled ears and concerns. Will you talk more about this on the pod? Appreciate you dudes. Boom. Man, that is a fantastic question. And we're going to talk about that next episode, the episode we're going to record later this week. Because you're absolutely right. And it's so funny. This happens. I was reading something this morning about revolutions, that revolutions always leave behind another slimy version of bureaucracy. And it was a great quote. And the same is true here. The good intentions of the movements of God always leave behind the slimy residue of bounded institutions. Absolutely right. And I love the word you use, dear commenter, about vigilance, because that is exactly what it is. And that's why I can only describe centered set dynamics as a set of relational habits and practices, and not as anything other than that. Because the minute I start defining them as, well, if they do this or they do this, then I've just succumbed to boundary issues. Usually, bounded folks, if you're really center set, will either be set for or they'll self-select out of any community that's really serious about this. And it requires loads of conversation and grace, loads of invitational conversation that goes something along the lines of, listen, I understand where you're coming from. We are pursuing Jesus with all our might. Here is the Jesus we are pursuing. You are invited to join us on this journey. But as we'll see this week, Jesus did confront the bounded thinking of the Pharisees and the scribes quite a bit. And so I think we're given permission to do that too. Now, how we do that is super important. Right. And we're going to talk about the difference between reintegrative shaming and disintegrative shaming. Because Jesus did shame the Pharisees in an honor and shame culture, but he did it hoping to reintegrate them. And to be sure, in the book of Acts, we read that many Pharisees came into his movement. So first of all, you're absolutely right. This is the constant version, because you are constantly being tempted, because it is easy, and because we're discipled by culture to do this. It is just easy to simply draw lines and reckon people on either side of them. That is and according to some theologians, that was the original sin. It was that we get to define good and evil for ourselves, and as a result, then engage in judgment of the other. So the centered set of practices that we're going to talk about, practices of curiosity and humility, those require constant practice, and they only happen in community, and we will fail. And obviously, the goal in following Jesus isn't to get centered set, thinking perfectly down. The goal of following Jesus is to become like Jesus. And that requires, I think, at times, resisting people who are bounded thinking people who come into the community and shame others. And this is the exact dynamic we're going to talk about next episode. So, because I do think that matters. I remember being in a community and leading a community where this young woman very courageously got up and sang a worship song in front of 1,800 people. This was his first time up front, and immediately got corrected upon coming down from the stage about the length of her skirt. And, that foolishness needs to be called out. But again, We call out the views without condemning the people, and that is the trick. The minute we start condemning the people, we're back into boundedness, no matter what it is we're condemning them for.
That's really interesting. The catalyst for, you tell me if I'm wording this incorrectly, the catalyst for the separation of heaven and earth was essentially us deciding that we could define good and evil. And when you take that,
not just for ourselves, though, for others too.
Right. And when you take that forward to the Sermon on the Mount or the new creation dynamics through that, that makes a really interesting narrative arc.
Yes. It does.
Because I never really thought about it that way. The knowledge of the tree of good and evil or whatever, that's actually really interesting, and that's what we're talking about.
Yep. Some people take that tree to mean sexual knowledge, and there's some textual evidence for that. Some people take it, and this is Greg Boyd. I don't know who he's channeling, but this is where I've heard it from, is the idea that the judgment of self, the self-condemning judgment and other condemning judgment was the result of the fall.
Because that was the first kind of thing that...
Yep.
Yeah.
So we took it upon ourselves. Mackie says this too. We took it upon ourselves to define good and evil for ourselves. But others see that tree as the experience of good and evil, that in their disobedience, they experienced evil and lost the good. So, I mean, there are any number of ways to
sort of even seem mutually exclusive.
I think I would hazard a guess that there's a bit of all of that involved.
Yeah, totally.
But the idea that what the Sermon on the Mount is doing, at least in part, is reversing that judgment mechanism. And so of course. And to me, if I can live in a place without judgmental, bad crino, and condemning attitudes towards others, then odds are I am practicing center set sort of way of life and community. That doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions. I think we're invited to have strong opinions and to really go after things like, you know, if I could have gotten to that young woman first, you know, I would have totally tried to protect her from the length of skirt conversation.
Having opinions that exclude other people. If that's the result or the goal of your opinion, then keep it to yourself.
Well, it's what we're going to talk about this week. All right, moving on. All right, dear Tim and Mike, I wanted to add my voice to the discussion that fellow listener Nick brought up regarding justice several episodes ago. He had me screaming amen, at least in my head, as I listened to his thoughts. So I thought I would add some personal perspective that I've gained over the last couple of years. Oh, this is one you're supposed to read.
Yeah.
All right, why don't you pick it up then? I'm sorry, I just saw the little T on it.
In November of 2018, my dad was killed by a drunk driver while taking a walk in the neighborhoods of my hometown. The driver was a young woman in her 20s, and she drove away unscathed. As a white dude from a healthy family in a quiet coastal town, this was the first time I actually earned the label victim. My family and I were suddenly part of a judicial process I had never seen from the inside, speaking with lawyers, providing court statements, and witnessing things unfold as justice, in quotes, was administered in the case against my father's killer. What has smacked me square in the face over and over again since that experience is how impoverished our idea of justice is in the evangelical church, especially when it comes to the cross. Nick is right about biblical justice. But I also want to add that even most human forms of retributive justice work in a way that makes more sense than the way many preachers portray the cross. When we put someone in jail, for instance, the point is to isolate someone who has proven themselves a threat to the vulnerable members of society so that they cannot do further harm. Now, I'm not saying this is true justice, but my point is that it is an attempt to protect the community, not just an arbitrary punishment because it fits the crime. But now I imagine myself in the very courtroom where this young woman was on trial, and I picture God speaking to me to say, I know you're broken right now because your father has been torn away from you. I want you to know that I'm going to make everything all right by letting that young woman walk free, and in her place, torturing the one person who loved you more than your dad, and then putting him to death. Seriously, what the hell? I'm sure some would criticize me of taking an overly simplistic explanation of the cross too literally. Oh, the irony. But honestly, this is the implication of what so often gets preached. The truth is our evangelical culture has proclaimed a false or perhaps partial gospel from the perspective of the guilty because collectively we don't know the perspective of the abused and marginalized. We're too rich and powerful to remember that there are real victims walking around with all the wounds of our sin and idolatry. And the message of blind impunity on the basis of Jesus taking our punishment is absolutely abhorrent to them. It's an image where evil isn't actually dealt with, pain and loss go unaddressed, and we as sinners are left unchanged. And of course, in reality, as Fleming Rutledge has said, the line between victim and perpetrator runs right through all of us. We all need restoration as much as we need reform if justice is going to be done. I'll finish with a quote and verse from Douglas Harink in his book, Resurrecting Justice. As you read it, make sure you have in mind the idea of justice that Nick shared in his email. In Messiah's faithful death, God makes his justice visible, speaks justice, does justice, and creates justice in us. God did this as a public display of his own justice because in God's forbearance, he passed over the sins previously committed so that in the now time of fulfillment, he might demonstrate that he himself is just and that he creates justice in those who share in the faithful death of Jesus.
Come on. Okay, Tim.
Yeah.
I think we agree that of all the podcasts out there, we have the highest ratio of people smarter than the hosts who listen.
It's a low bar, though.
Can we just agree?
Yeah.
Man, this is all so good. That is phenomenal, and that's worth a whole, pod conversation. Because justice is different than punishment, and often the cross is construed as in punishment terms, not in justice terms, and those are two totally different terms. So for me, and I don't think he's being overly literal. For me, the statement was, you have sinned, you are guilty, God is just and sends you to hell unless you receive Jesus who paid the price for your sin. And we'll use a legal picture of a judge fining you and then paying the fine as the predominant metaphor. So absolutely. And that does nothing to the Romans text that was just quoted about God demonstrating his justice. So my goodness, that is a wonderful, wonderful comment and an expansion, a furtherance of that conversation into some good water. So I think that is a conversation that we will continue to have. I think there's a lot there to learn about. So this is an instance, and where your emails come in and set a trajectory for the podcast that we wouldn't have set. Like this unity conversation wouldn't have happened had this person emailed and said, am I supposed to be unified with people who endorse X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
And I mean, my goodness, this is another example of that same dynamic. All right. We've got a few more. Hi, Mike and Tim. My deconstruction story has less to do with theology and more to do with church leadership and mental illness. I was very involved in the church I attended previously. I led a life group and was part of the first discipleship group with that pastor, and then a couple of other discipleship groups after that. I was never told I couldn't ask questions, although most of my questions got the canned answers you'd expect from a conservative evangelical church. But we still liked the pastor's preaching and vision for the church. I invited a friend and his family to our church who had not been to church in a long time. About a year after being there, my friend was hospitalized for making suicidal statements. He said that while he was in the hospital, two elders from that church came to visit him and read 1 Corinthians 13, the love passage, to him one line at a time, pausing after each line to look up and add, "You are not." So for instance, love is patient, you are not.
The
Love is
pastors
kind.
read that to the person in the hospital?
The elders did, yes. Love is patient, you are not. Love is kind, you are not. After talking to the pastor, he basically confirmed that was what had happened, said I could not be at the meeting the leadership was going to have with my friend, and shortly after, my friend and his family were dismissed from church leadership. The leadership told me that they would not talk to me any further about what took place. I wasn't aware at the time, but that was when my depression began. No doubt. Then the pandemic happened. After we were able to meet in person again, I felt anxiety every week. I went to church for about the next 8 months. Occasionally, I would talk to the pastor after church, and while struggling to hold back tears, I would say things like, I hate being here. I feel like I've wasted my time. I don't feel like I'm part of this community. I was diagnosed with severe depression. After being medicated, I asked my pastor if we could talk about my comments now that I was thinking more clearly. When we met, we talked about depression. He didn't address any of my comments and then told me, we're not going to talk about any of this again. Don't bring it up after today. After about a month after, I was back in the same depressed mental state despite being medicated. We resigned from church membership 2 months before a cross-country move. They accepted our resignation with no follow-up. All attempts to pursue understanding and reconciliation with my pastor were ignored. I was wrong to think he was a friend. He could only ever be a pastor in position over me and one who was unwilling to walk with me through one of the darkest times of my life. Now we've moved, and I've brought my depression with me and an inability to trust church leadership. I will not sign another statement of faith, will not become a member of a church. I will work full-time in a support-based ministry. I work full-time in a support-based ministry, and I feel trapped in the evangelical community because 90% of my income comes from white conservative evangelical Christians and churches. Fake it till I make it, I guess. Anywho, not to be a Debbie Downer, I'm thankful for the podcast and the ways you've helped me make sense of my faith and given me a vision for what to look for in a Jesus-centered community. My hopes aren't too high because we are not living in, I think we're now living in a small town conservative North Carolina. Okay, I'm going to try to stop being super cynical now. First of all, thank you for sharing that with us. I am so very sorry for what happened. Church and mental illness is a pretty dangerous topic for churches because very, very often pastors are told that faith is the answer and that reading and praying more or that they are qualified to offer advice and wisdom to people who are struggling with mental illness because it's ultimately a spiritual issue. Now, I have no doubt that there are spiritual issues involved. I also think there are physical issues, emotional issues, family of origin issues, all sorts of attachment issues. So I think you can't just look at mental illness through one grid and say, well, it's just a spiritual problem. I don't think that's true, nor do I think it's just a physical problem all the time. Maybe it could be. I'm open to that. But what my experience was is it was a whole person problem. I had to do things physically. Yeah. I had to do things mentally. I had to work through stuff emotionally. I had to practice certain forms of thinking and work my way off of other forms of rumination. I had to have a community that was supportive of even when I was anxious and not thinking clearly, all the things. So on the one hand, the way that we treat pastors, it's changing, at least in communities I'm aware of, where pastors now recognize the issues involved are far beyond our training and Bible verse to kind of slap over them. I'm not sure what the heart was of the elders going to a person who'd expressed suicidal ideation and saying, okay, this is what love is, but you are not this. I mean, I don't know if that's the beginning of a gospel presentation that says you're a sinner and need Jesus.
It's just pure garbage.
I have no idea, but that is awful.
That is abuse, and that is demonic, and that is, makes me very angry.
Yes. And so no wonder you were in turn affected by this. And all I can say is, we have a dear friend on our board who asked the question the other day. We get together as a little Vox team, and she was saying, how do I integrate back into church? Like, I've had these experiences. I'm cynical and jaded, but I don't want to give up on the whole project. So how do I integrate back? And I sense a similar question from you. I mean, of course, I would have the same suspicion, and of course, I would be as anxious and concerned about, church leadership and all the things. Absolutely, I would totally protect myself. And I don't even know if in that situation I would have given up on the whole institution itself. So the last thing I'm going to say is stop being cynical. I think there's a place for a degree of skepticism about the promises and personalities of the evangelical church in America these days. So I think that is a healthy thing. I think you can find the community you're looking for, but I wouldn't trust the organization to provide it.
No.
So, find like-minded folks. He also, when I asked if I could read this email, he came back and said that when he listened to Dan Koch episodes ago, that was when he decided to go to counseling himself. And so we're so proud of you for that. But, when people say, just bringing it back to the deconstruction conversation, that deconstruction is just something we're doing to be cool. I don't think so. I think that is lived trauma.
Yes.
And it takes, I think a mentor of mine said, we are broken in community and we're healed in community. The problem is the institution shouldn't define the community.
Right.
Unless the institution is committed to the kinds of community that represent, center set dynamics. The problem is in large churches, you simply can't administrate community with people who are healthy. So, so my encouragement is if we can practice a community where you don't initially have cynicism, then do that. But it's okay to walk into the organization or institutional forms and be a bit skeptical and held back.
Yeah.
I would just commend you for counseling. I would commend you for sharing your story. I would commend you that I don't think we, even in the midst of such awfulness, should give up on the idea that it is possible to experience the better kind of community. I just think we have to be super careful and slow in trying to find it. So anything you want to add to that, Timothy?
Nope. I think that makes me too angry to make a well-articulated response. I would have bounced. I would also be very skeptical, and I'm already skeptical and cynical. So,
yeah.
But if there are other people out there, what do you say, North Carolina?
Yeah.
That are in North Carolina. I mean, we need, at some point, this pandemic will end and we'll get back to micro communities.
Yep.
And so maybe there's a group of listeners in that area that we can connect together.
Fantastic.
And you can start building community before you worry about
finding it.
Man, the church conversation is such a minefield.
Yep. Oof. And by the way, as I'm sitting here, I think Tim is doing a great job answering some of these. I don't think I am doing a good job answering these. I'd love more thought on these, but we purposely just wanted to sort of react. But the point really isn't even our answers, right? I mean, the point is the questions are valued and the community is having a conversation. And so, man, we're just so grateful that you trust us with all this stuff. All right, Tim, your turn.
All right. Let's see. Which one haven't we read? Hi, gentlemen.
There it is. First of all, this person doesn't know us, clearly, from that introduction.
You're a gentle giant.
No, she is. She actually does, and she's been super fun. She's been emailing a lot.
Oh. Gotcha.
Yeah. It just, I don't get called that very often.
A gentleman?
Yeah.
We can call you that more often if you'd like.
And a scholar?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't ask for too much.
Perfect.
Thanks for breaking down this whole topic of loving each other well and guiding folks toward wisdom with boundedness. Wisdom versus boundedness and rules. I had emailed you a while back with a question about a discipline situation, and you asked if you could read it, and I had said yes, but it never got on the podcast, so I still have the question. I will try to summarize it here. A niece of mine, we will say Jane, was getting married and asked their cousin, another niece of mine, we will call Sue. So Jane's getting married and asked her cousin Sue to be in her bridal party. However, when Sue asked if Jane was sleeping with her fiancé and found out she was, Sue refused to be in the wedding party, believing that she would be complicit in supporting such sin. Sue and her family didn't even attend the wedding because it caused such a rift between them. This caused a tremendous amount of anguish for everyone who knew about it. Others of us who knew the situation didn't necessarily think it was wise, but were happy they were getting married, which remedied the issue. I want to talk to Sue about how she handled the whole thing, but don't know how to begin directing her to less bounded thinking. Sue and her husband have also cut off relationships with other relatives when the relatives don't behave or perform to the Christian expectations or rules. What would you all say to her?
Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. No, first of all, that is a great question. And actually, particularly when gay marriage was legalized, we got a ton of questions about, if I go, am I complicit in their sin? So I want to back up a second and just question the paradigm. Because one of the things that really shocked me when I learned it was that Jesus practiced table fellowship in a way where that same accusation was made against him. For the Pharisees, table fellowship was the embodied practice of Jewish righteousness that would cause the Messiah to come and God to bring about the whole restoration plan of Israel called resurrection. All right, so for the Pharisees, table fellowship was the performance of everything that is distinctive about being Jewish. And within Judaism, everything distinctive about being righteous, as they defined it. So when Jesus gathers, in ancient Near Eastern cultures and in some Eastern cultures today, meals are where you perform your social status. So if you have a high social status, you eat with high social status people. If you have a low social status, you eat with sinners and tax collectors and so on. And the idea is whoever you dine with, you're sharing status with in that culture. So Jesus, when he shares status with Levi, the tax collector, and a bunch of tax collectors and sinners, the Pharisees, of course, mutter against him, saying, why does he go and eat and dine with sinners? When Jesus shares status and invites Zacchaeus to host him for a meal, the crowds begin to mutter against him, asking the very same question. When Jesus is called a drunkard and a glutton and a friend of sinners, in essence, there's a Deuteronomy passage in the background of that. But the idea of friend of sinners just means that he shares status with sinners. Yeah. And from the Pharisees, that means he is complicit in their crimes. Now, Jesus and the Pharisees did share one common goal, and that was to call Israel to repentance. For the Pharisees, repentance looked like becoming a Pharisee. And so they used disintegrative shaming. They would exclude people. They used boundedness. So unless you ate... Disintegrative
shaming.
Yes. It was designed to make sure that you knew and the group knew that you were not part of the group.
Yeah.
And so they excluded as a means to calling people to righteousness. Jesus was calling people to righteousness too. For him, righteousness meant that the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven has come near, and God's promise for the blessing of the nations through Israel is now coming true. And that the justice involved and the righteousness involved in this movement was going to look far different than the conceptions of the Pharisees. And so for Jesus, table fellowship, in the same way for the Pharisees, was an enacted, symbolic, and parabolic performative action that showed the nature of his kingdom. All right? So when Jesus gets accused of sharing in the sins of others and validating their sin, this was the means by which Jesus was calling people to repentance. He was calling people to repentance through his sharing status with them before they repented. Okay, that is so important. That the movement of Jesus as a holiness movement was granted to people before they performed the expected signs of Jewish repentance.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so unbelievably important, because what that means is that as we want to call people to repentance, and I even shake using, that phrase, there are two different ways to do it. There's the way of sue, which is the exclusive. I will pull myself away from this. I will shame. I will ignore. I will distance myself.
I will not be complicit.
Yes, I will not be complicit. And then there is the way of Jesus that didn't mind being seen as complicit for the sake of maintaining relationship and communicating that I am committed to you, with you, and for you, regardless of whether or not you ever act differently. And so I don't know how, unless you are in a relationship with Sue that is full of committed to her, committed to be with her, committed to be for her, and that she knows that, I don't know how she will receive any conversation in any other way than in the bounded ways that she's accustomed to thinking in. So I would simply ask, if I were confronted with Sue, I would simply ask a whole bunch of questions. And I would ask questions like, okay, why do you think not being complicit in someone else's sin is such a big deal? Like, where do you see that in the text?
Yeah.
Do you think removing yourself maintains the relationship and helps? Or do you think maybe staying there could have helped more?
Totally.
Do you regret how you handled that situation? Do you think that the family was somehow bettered by the way that you handled this? No, these are just off the top of our heads,
I think
right?
those are
These
great
not
questions, though.
Well, that's the only way I would ever know it, because any torting, any correction, she's going to receive as a bounded way and just cut you off too.
No, just sit in love and have a conversation about it.
Yep. And ask questions. Do you think this was helpful? Why do you think this is important? What about when Jesus was, seen as a friend of sinners? Do you think it's possible to, for the sake of some greater good, stay in communion with people? What about the fact that they are getting married? Wouldn't that be worthy of blessing? Those sorts of invitational questions, but I certainly wouldn't do anything. If there were questions back, I would go into the whole Jesus thing. Like, Jesus called people to repentance through the integration of them into his community before they did the proper. Now, some of them did repent. I mean, obviously, Matthew repented right away by just getting up and leaving his tax collecting station. Zacchaeus got up and repented right away. But it was because of the gracious initiative of Jesus towards them before they repented that they repented.
Yeah.
And so it is grace that leads us, and kindness that lead us to repentance. So the new creation dynamic posture for me that I want to practice is, unless the action of somebody is hurting the community, and engaging in sort of disintegrative shaming or whatever, I want to be fully supportive of wherever they are in their journey. Now, that doesn't mean I approve, but when Timothy, does it ever say, love your neighbor if you approve?
Right.
It never says that. It never says love your neighbor unless you'll be seen as being complicit in their sin. It never says it.
We just got to stop projecting so much too. Like, if someone's smoking and you're having a conversation with someone that you love and you're like, hey, this isn't the best habit. There are some serious health implications. You're getting too old for this. Some people are able to hear that, see it, and quit cold turkey and walk away from it. Other people, it's very difficult to cut that habit, and it may take years of engaging that conversation, but still sitting with them and walking with them through it. And it's like the prescriptive version of this is how this goes.
Yeah.
This is how you should respond. And if you do not, see ya. It's such a weirdly just so sewn into us. The other thing too is like, man, this is that evangelicals. It's like we're so, or Sky calls it crotch Christianity. We're so obsessed with sex, and more so, we're so obsessed with other people's sex.
Yeah.
It's wild times.
At Ridgemont High. Anyway, or that was Fast Times. All right, let's try 2 more. I mean, these deserve episodes all their own. This is so good. I'm serious. I'm not making this up. This is so good. And I really do. I feel like we could do individual episodes on every question that's been asked.
Yeah, totally.
And I almost, and I'm a perfectionist, and so I would want to do all the background and research and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
All right, greetings, Mike. Hey, thank you for just addressing me.
Yeah.
Doggone it. Enough.
I'm exhausted.
Enough of the Tim, okay? We all know he does the heavy lifting around here, but doggone it, it's nice to be recognized. I cannot thank you enough for the blessing Voxology has been for me over the last 6 months. Also, was more than happy to jump on the Patreon bandwagon. Thank you for that. I discovered Voxology through your guest appearances on the Holy Post. God bless Sky, Phil, Christian, and Caitlin. I started listening to Voxology last summer while I was carrying my mail route, and I've listened now to every episode. Okay, there should be some sort of award for that. That is crazy.
Yeah, there is. It's called pride.
So here, he says some other nice things. Yeah, here's my deconstruction story. I grew up a Midwestern boy to Catholic parents. Around the age of 7, my parents decided to homeschool and became evangelical Christians.
Sounds like a John Mellencamp song.
That led to a decade of jumping from church to church, never really feeling at home anywhere, a pretty severe amount of loneliness and isolation, and an unwavering commitment to white Republican conservative values. Add to that an increasingly spiritually, emotionally, and physically abusive fundamentalist father figure, and a mother spiritually battered into submission in the name of wives submit to your husbands as to the Lord, and I had the perfect recipe for spiritual crisis. My goodness, you did. I'm so sorry. During my teen/early adult years, I spent time at a Christian summer camp where I met Christians who didn't share all the same cultural values as me. And as time passed, I would eventually fall in love and marry a woman with whom I shared almost no spiritual baggage. As a fairly liberal person, she helped me to start to reconsider that maybe some of the way I looked at the world wasn't necessarily consistent with how the world really is, or with the Christian story I was claiming as my own. Now I'm married and I live in the suburbs of one of the most liberal cities in the Midwest. I moved here in the summer of 2020. COVID was just starting. The election nightmare was in full swing, and I found myself having to look at the fruit of the evangelicalism that I grew up with, and ask myself, is this the way of Jesus? Is this what the way of Jesus is supposed to look like? Having just come out of a contentious time with my own parents over masks, church closings, and vaccines, I knew my faith was on the ropes, so I dived into podcasts to rediscover what about Jesus and the Christian vision I find so compelling. Now I understand the way of Jesus challenges what comes most naturally to us. Yes, that is a great way to say that. Yes, yes, yes. It disrupts what's ordinary and normal and common in human life. Oh, that's so good. It calls us into a beautiful movement of people committed to bringing the kingdom of heaven on earth through self-sacrificial love. Oh, man, somebody's preaching right now. The biggest struggle is knowing how to go about living it out. Yes, yes, yes. And because frankly, it's hard. Yes. My father has all but disowned me and thinks I've lost my faith. Oh, man, that is so hard. The liberal people I now live around don't understand me. It's as though trying to live like Jesus upsets everyone, and not having found a Christian community has been really hard on me. But I'm committed to this journey of faith, and I can't wait for the things Jesus is going to do to show me about himself next. feel free to share my story if you think it's appropriate. One last thing. I'm currently trying to find a church in the Madison, Wisconsin area. Now that the pandemic is winding down, I'm pretty sure I know where I want to start attending, but I wanted to ask, how do I keep from being a fundamentalist when it comes to church policies? And when is it appropriate to draw lines? For example, women in ministry. I believe women should be allowed to serve in any and every ministry role. If my church is part of a denomination that doesn't allow that, should that be a deal breaker? And if not, what things should be? Just trying to remain faithful to a Christian vision of a flourishing, healthy Christian community. Any advice is greatly appreciated. Oh, man. So freaking good. I'm doing a lot of talking, Timothy. You got anything on this?
What was the phrase that you were excited about first? The common, normal?
No, he said, let's see. Now I understand the way of Jesus challenges what comes most naturally to us.
There was something else in there too. You said that had those words, and they are like synonymous with complacency, and it seems like that's one of the things that gets us in the most trouble. Is like when we become idle, we become complacent, and then we get defensive.
Yes,
and it just seems like all of that is so opposite of everything that Jesus was trying to do and say.
I love that.
When it comes to church bodies, that kind of stuff is a deal breaker for me. And I'm not saying that that's how it should be, but anything that leads to exclude, I am weary of now. Not weary.
Yeah.
I'll walk the other way. You won't let women pastor or teach? I'm out. You won't let LGBTQ plus people be part of your congregation? Seek Jesus with you? I'm out. Especially when you're not even a part of the body yet, and you're just like, hey, is this a community that I should join? I think it's fine to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about what the word deal breaker means for a second.
All right.
So there are all sorts of issues I'm willing to live in Christian tension on with people that don't agree.
Yes.
And I think that's going to be true of every community ever. You just, if you find what's the joke? If you find a community that thinks like you found a cult, right? I mean, that, right? If it is challenging, then it should be challenging. And the new humanity is representative of all of these different people from all these different places.
Yeah. The one person that I have dedicated my entire life to living with, we have a myriad of things not in common.
What?
Yeah. And she's the person that I love more than anybody else. So it's like in that one-on-one dynamic, there's tension.
Yes. So if deal breaker means I'm in community with people who hold views that I don't agree with, then I'm toast. So that can't be what a deal breaker means. If a deal breaker means how institutions organize their communal life, then I'm really interested because organizations can do that in all sorts of different ways and call it Christian. So when I was evaluating working for a community, things that were important to me, obviously a community of people who were committed to Jesus, B, a community of people who were committed to the Jesus of the center that I see and understand.
Right.
C, a community of people who have demonstrated a willingness to work through power, money, and inter-church conflict in ways that promote centered set thinking and practice. Now, those three things, right? Power, money, and conflict. Those are my issues. And evaluative tools, because this is where organization and institution blend into community, right? So I have things I look for as part of a healthy community, and one of them cannot be people I agree with. But there are things I look for as a healthy institution that are different, because there is no way to get a healthy community out of an unhealthy institution if you're not really deliberate in opposition to it. And typically, an institution will not allow communities to exist that are opposed to it. So, so for me, part of being a new creation community is its posture towards people who are on the margins of church culture or culture at large.
Yeah.
So that includes women, that includes LGBTQ people, that includes liberals and conservatives, so if this is a community that allows for people to process doubt, struggle with all sorts of things and issues without having to decide upon their salvation or order their discipleship, all of those dynamics I am constantly looking for. And if they come at the organizational level through embodied leadership practice, transparency about money, and gracious and humble handling of church conflict, then I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm very much less about the kind of worship songs or whether the teaching's good. You can get good teaching and good worship anywhere. Those should not be central to our search.
Yeah.
What's central to our search are the relational dynamics that the institution has around those power issues. And if it's shared leadership, that is absolutely important. If there's humble leadership, if there's honesty and transparency about what's really happening and why people leave and all of those sorts of things. Those are, I wouldn't call them deal breakers, but I would call them flags that if added up would cause me to not attend a community.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if a deal breaker is commonality, then only bounded churches sort of foster that.
Totally.
If it is willingness to sit in all the messy relational dynamics of centered set practice that are presented in the Sermon on the Mount and are implemented in organizational practices. So that's at least where I would start the conversation. Dear questioner, thank you for, phenomenal. This is phenomenal. All right, Tim.
Yes.
You know what? I think we should wrap it here, buddy.
Yeah.
I think we should wrap it here. So, friends, countrymen and women, lend us your ears. We just want to say thank you. From a very disappointed household here in the South to a snowy household here in Northern California.
Yeah.
We encompass all the weather, all the views, all the governors. Anyway, just thank you. Would you give us feedback on this episode? Is this helpful? Because we can do extra episodes all the time. We have like dozens and dozens and dozens of emails like these.
Yeah.
If this is a helpful thing for the community, we'd love to do it. Because answering some of these over email, how do you even do that? That's why they add up. Some of these there's no way you can answer over email. So anyway, friends, thank you for trusting us with this. We love you guys, and we'll be recording an episode for next Monday as well. See ya.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Voxology is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is supported by listeners just like yourself. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology. You can also join the community and hang out and chat with us on the socials. Facebook.com/Voxology Podcast and on Instagram @Voxology. Thank you for walking the long road with us.